Hi, this is Aviral Singh and welcome back to All Things 3D. Over the last couple of days, a few of you have asked me how much does it actually cost to create a 3D printing setup? So that is what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about it in the context of India. So what you see behind me is called a hobby printer. That is the lowest in the ranges and it can go up very high from this range for professional printers. The biggest difference between hobby printers and professional printers and everything in middle is as you go up in the range, printers become more plug and play. What do I mean by plug and play? It means that out of the box, they will give you a certain print quality. A hobby printer like this needs to be tuned, needs to be played with, needs to be analyzed, needs to be cared for, actually loved in order to give you that print quality. But a well-tuned printer, a well-tuned hobby printer can actually give you a print quality which is almost as good, if not as good, as some of the more expensive printers. So coming to cost, this particular hobby printer is from a brand called Creality. You can find other brands in hobby printers as well as you'll find some local Indian brands also, which I do not know much about. But this printer will run you about 20,000 rupees on most sites in India. That is fairly cheap. Some printers, such as the famous Prusa printer, will actually run you, depending on the model, about 65,000 rupees to 90,000 rupees. And some really expensive machines like Mark Forged, which are actually used in the industry, will run you in the range of about 3 lakhs to 5 lakhs. But let's talk about the 20,000 machine, which we can tune to print really good. So when you get a printer, a hobby printer, especially the printer that I have here, there are a couple of things you need to look at right away. The first thing you need to look at is the extruder. With the printer, you get a plastic extruder, which really is something that we should change right away. Plastic extruders don't really perform the way metal extruders do, and that is recommended that we change it right away. You can get metal extruders such as this or that and replace it right away without any issues. The second thing you can do is look at the Bowden tube. If you're going to do anything which is high temperature, then it is recommended that you change it with a Capricorn Bowden tube, which can withstand higher temperatures than the default Bowden tubes that we get, but only if you're doing things which are high temperature. The other thing that I would really recommend is getting a few spare nozzles. This is for different sizes, as well as when you run out of the nozzle or the nozzle goes bad, that is something I would get as soon as possible. One other thing that people recommend is the micro SD card which comes with the machine, getting another micro SD card. While I have gotten a spare micro SD card, the one which came with my particular machine is working fine, but that is something that I would also recommend. Next thing I want to talk about is tools. The machine comes with all the tools that you need to build and operate the machine. But I would still recommend getting a couple more tools to really fill out your toolbox. The first thing I would recommend, which I think is a necessity, is a vernier caliper. You can get these digital vernier calipers. These allow me to measure anything that I'm trying to build and measure my parts once I've built them. The other thing I would recommend is getting a nose plier and a regular plier in case you don't already have one. There are other things that we might want to use for the build process. The one thing which is a complete necessity is 95% minimum. In this case, it is 99% pure IPA or isopropyl alcohol, which is going to be used to actually to clean the build plate when we build things on it. And if your bed adhesion isn't there, then you could potentially use something like a glue stick. Purple one works better. Some kind of a hairspray, or painter's tape. This is something that you can experiment with once you've started using the machine and you need something for the build plate. In my case, my build plate adhesion is fine without using any of these additives. Then we come to the most important thing of all. How are we going to print if we don't have filament? So filament typically comes in spools like this, and you can get them in multiple weights. I normally use the 1 kg spool. Now, one thing we have to be careful of is that a 1 kg spool could come in two different ways. 1 kg net, which means that the spool has 1 kg of actual filament on it, or 1 kg gross, which means 1 kg is actually including the weight of the spool. Now, a typical spool of either PLA or ABS will cost you somewhere between 900 and 1200 rupees typically. Just make sure that you know whether it is 1 kg gross or 1 kg net. For that purpose, you would also want to get a weighing machine. This is a simple weighing machine which allows me to check the weight of my spool as well as the weight of the parts that I have printed. The last thing I want to talk about is that PLA, to a certain extent ABS, and especially PETG are very sensitive to humidity. As you can see, I live in a high humidity area, my humidity being 81%. So I would recommend getting a hygrometer so that you know the humidity. The humidity that you want to operate at for these filaments is between 10 and 15%, which is a far cry from the 81% that you currently see. So for that, you can get a box which is heated, which you can print out of, which will cost you about 5,000 rupees. But what I have done is created something homegrown. What I do for that is I have put a plastic box into which I can put a spool. I have put those parts in there and I can put a roller and put the spool in there and print out of there, along with these hygroscopic crystals which are rechargeable in the oven and actually absorb humidity. While I haven't been able to get down to 15%, which is my target, I typically operate at 20%, which isn't too bad, but I still want to get down to 15%. So, we talked about a lot of spare parts and a lot of tools, in addition to getting the printer. Now, most of these spare parts and these tools will range between 500 to 700 rupees on various sites, depending on the quality that you buy. Some could even be cheaper. The one other thing you may want to get, especially if your electricity is not reliable because the machine will stop the moment it loses electricity, is a UPS, which would run you about 8,000 rupees in addition. Now, with all of that, your whole setup, including all the tools that you buy, including your UPS, would run you somewhere between 25 to 35,000 rupees depending on the setup that you get. Remember, being a hobby printer, you will also need to get spare parts occasionally, but spare parts for the most part will range you from 200 to 500 rupees, sometimes even cheaper. The nozzles and the connectors and stuff are like 40 rupees. So this is not a very expensive hobby. This is something that you can start with and really enjoy and get so much fun out of it that you tune your machine to print parts which print like the more expensive machines worth 3 lakh. Won't that be fun? So thank you and see you in the next episode.